So President Obama was on Marc Maron's show, the WTF with Marc Maron podcast, and he said something, well, he said the N-word, and now conservatives are flipping out. So first, let's go to what he said. Now, he was talking about, of course, the aftermath of the Charleston shooting and, of course, race relations in America. If you can remember, Obama gave a great speech about race back when I believe he was a senator when he gave that speech about race in America. So he's always been very good and very eloquent when speaking about race. Now, not so much. He says racism, we are not cured of it, and it's just a matter of it not being polite to say the N-word in public. Now, think about that, and think about the context of what this is said, because context is going to be very important. Now, he also said that's not the measure of whether racism exists or not. It's just a matter of overt discrimination. Societies don't overnight completely erase everything that happened 200 to 300 years prior. Or in our case, well, I mean, that is also our case, but even 50 years since the end of Jim Crow and the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Now, he says, I always tell young people in particular, do not say that nothing has changed when it comes to race in America unless you lived through being a black man in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. It is incontrovertible that race relations have improved significantly during my lifetime and yours. The legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, and discrimination exists in institution and casts a long shadow that is still part of our DNA that is passed on. So, if you look at the context, him saying that, I think, is incredibly appropriate. And context matters.
Yeah, I don't think anybody with comprehension skills that exceed that of a 10-year-old would disagree with that. I mean, the context was perfectly appropriate, and I think that a lot of the conservatives that are outraged about this, they're just kind of grabbing for a quick headline, and then they're just trying to, I mean, it's just faux outrage, clickbait outrage. I think it's going to die off in very soon, and probably by the time this goes up. But I think what's actually newsworthy here is the fact that the president is doing a podcast that Marc Maron started in his garage. I think the biggest part of this story, the coolest part of this story, is the success that this is for independent media, which is a world that both you and I are a part of, Jeff.
Sure.
And is a big success for podcasting and new media, and it goes to show you that the landscape is changing. And I think it's also cool for President Obama. It's cool that he did it, that he put it on his agenda. I don't know a whole lot of how it materialized, but I understand he did have a desire to do it, I think. And so that's a great thing. And I listened to Marc Maron's podcast a good bit because I like a lot of the similar music to what Marc Maron likes. In fact, a couple times I've met Marc, we've talked about music the whole time, so I do like his podcast a lot because a lot of the musicians he has on are people I like. And he does a really good job getting to know them and getting to really get their story out of them. He's really good at that because he's a really curious person, and he's just good at getting people to open up. It's kind of like This American Life, but no holds barred, but totally unedited. So I think that Obama may have been in a moment of passion that Marc helped bring out of him, and I think that's a great thing, and I can't wait to hear the podcast.
Yeah, and another thing about President Obama is that he's always been very, I think, internet savvy, and that was one of his things, one of his claims to, fame as well.
Yeah, it helped him win a couple elections.
Yeah. Unlike what conservatives would say, voter fraud and or other things. But okay, so let's get into conservative reaction to this anyway, because they're going to flip out. It's going to be a soundbite. Let's soundbite it anyway. Let's get some clickbait out there. Okay?
Yeah, that's what we're
So,
doing.
Elizabeth Hasselbeck, she responded on this. I think many people wondering if it's only there he would say it, and perhaps not in a State of the Union or more public address. So she wonders if he's just going to say the N-word all the time. Now, that's a weird question to ask, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, it's a dumb question to ask. I mean, it's.
Like, they think he's going to bust it out like he's like rapper Obama or something, just saying the N-word. a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
It's really strange. It's really strange. David Webb, who is a Black Fox contributor, right? He says, quote, "I'm not shocked by Obama using the N-word. It's playing into this narrative because it supports what he needs to push his agenda." He says that we basically have not evolved as a society, that racism is still institutional in the United States. And here's the most surprising thing. He says it's not, because we don't have codified law. We don't have social acceptance. As a matter of fact, we have overturned racism. There's always going to be racists. Really?
I mean, there's always going to be racist people. I agree with that part.
Sure, but we have overturned racism. We don't have social acceptance, and we don't have racism because it's not codified in law. Really? Mm-hmm. That's an interesting thing to say, which I don't at all agree with.
No, these are weird statements.
They are.
I mean, they really are. Like,
yeah. Jeez. And okay, Steve Ducey, and he asked a question. The question is, if you feel it's okay for the President of the United States to make this kind of comment, is it okay for him to stand in the briefing room of the White House to do it, in front of a joint session of Congress, State of the Union? Should he use that word if he wants to talk about racism? And I think if he uses the correct context, because context matters, then yes, he can use that word. Context matters.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting this is coming from people in the media, too, saying this, because them, of all people, should be aware that there's an agency out there called the FCC. The FCC has certain rules. Those rules don't need to be followed on a podcast. Those rules do need to be followed on cable television or during a press briefing, which is also on cable television or public television, whatever. If you read the FCC, can I finish? If you read the FCC rules, can I finish, Jeff? If you read the FCC rules, they say exactly what you just said, Jeff. They say that context is everything, context is key. It's not just the words themselves. Now, there's a couple loopholes in that where certain words they could really kind of find even if context wasn't a thing. But the FCC does say, it's right there in their verbiage on their website, that context for the most part is everything. So he technically, I mean, chances are he could have said that on cable TV and it would have been fine.
Right. I was just going to point out that I hope that the FCC never goes to regulate podcasts and the internet in the way that they regulate cable TV. That's all.
I hope not too. Yeah, I don't think we have anything to worry about, not anytime soon at least.
Right. So, no, it is interesting how these people on Fox News are freaking out over this. And I don't know, like, I'm not sure if I'm of the opinion of it's because they want to say it really badly or not, you know?
I think it's just faux outrage. I don't think they have some agenda to say it. I think it's just faux outrage. They're grabbing for anything. Because I think it's a really cool occurrence and it's a really cool story. And I think a lot of people are going to just get on board with the fact that that's cool Obama's doing that. So they want to try to poison the well somehow, so they're grasping at straws. And yeah, giving the context, it's kind of ridiculous on their part, but...
Still, I do believe some people out there do really want to say it and not get in trouble for it. There's always those people.
There's always those people. And you know what? For those people that are out there, if that's what you want to do so bad, start your own podcast and say it till you're blue in the face.
There you go. I suppose that works. And you know what? That's your free speech, right?
That's right. Yeah.
America.